Hi, this is Bob Samuels, founder of TechConnectr. TechConnectr is a marketplace and campaign management platform of best-of-breed, account-based marketing lead generation solutions. In association with the Serious Decisions Summit, we're happy to bring you wisdom from leading account-based marketing thought leaders. To that end, I'm proud to introduce you to Ricky Abbott of Transmission, a data-driven, customer-obsessed B2B marketing agency based in the UK. Ricky recently moved to the San Francisco Bay Area as President of the Americas. Ricky, I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak with you. How are you today?
I'm very well. Yourself?
I'm doing well too. It's a beautiful day here in California. Life is good.
Really is.
So I wanted to I wanted to speak with you about one of my favorite topics, which is account-based marketing. And there's a lot of different thoughts and ideas, and it's a very vague subject. Can you give a little bit of a background about? Well, first of all, give a little bit of background of you, where you've been as in your career as far as dealing with ABM, and then how do you guys at Transmission think of ABM, and how do you approach it?
Sure. So as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not from the United States. I'm a Brit. But I've been running ABM programs now for the best part of 5 years across the globe. And it's actually been an interesting journey because the different ways in which the different regions either understand ABM or leverage ABM is a real nuance. So, for example, in EMEA, much more focus around one-to-one ABM programs. In the US, it's much more at scale. But certainly the way we look at ABM is that it shouldn't be a tactic, it should be a strategic discipline. And what I mean by that is, again, this is not saying the US, is just in generally, a lot of companies will think ABM is a MarTech provider, like a demand-based and Terminus. And those guys are amazing. They're a really, really useful solution as an element of as part of an ABM program. But if ABM is run correctly, it should be a strategic discipline that involves everything from understanding your accounts, and whether you're using data or whether you're leveraging internal intelligence, that's how you understand who's the target audience I should be going after. How do I segment them down? How do I build that into my ABM programs? And by programs, I don't just mean let's do a one-to-one, one-to-many. How do all those different layers feed each other? So one-to-many feeding one-to-few, feeding one-to-one. Then how do I understand my audience, my personas, my stakeholders? How does that feed into needs-based messaging? How does that then feed into my content and my creative? How does that then feed into my omni-channel activation programs by persona? How does that then feed into my sales enablement? How does that feed into my reporting? That whole cycle has to work together. And a lot of companies get stuck on activation and personalizing your website without thinking about the message. And you can personalize the website as much as you want. You can personalize your ads as much as you want. But if the message is incorrect, you're not going to resonate with that audience. So for us, everything has to work in tandem. Now, there are shortcuts you can take, and there's certainly things that you can do quicker to get you off the ground. But if you want to see longevity and success over a longer period of time, you have to follow a methodology or a strategic framework.
That's well said. So before you jump into it, you really need to think through the whole strategy and identifying who you're going to go after, what are you going to talk to them about, how you're going to resonate with them, and that sort of thing. And then there's tools out there.
Exactly, yeah. Tools are part of your armory, if you will, but they shouldn't be the starting point. And I think a lot of people make the mistake of trying to use tools to fix all their problems. And when it doesn't work, they then blame the provider, which actually I think is a really bad thing to happen in this industry. And I often think that some of the providers are actually unfairly picked on, when actually they should be worked with.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the providers include, I guess, I think you mentioned the Terminuses and demand bases, and then there's Engagio.
Yeah, I'm just using those. Yeah, I'm using those guys as an example. Engagio is slightly different because obviously Engagio is much more of a reporting and analytics platform rather than necessarily, and you've also got their playbook solution, but ultimately they're a bit more around bringing this intelligence together to make it into meaningful insight. But again, if you've not got the right message, you're not going to resonate. If you're not going to resonate, you're not going to have the analytics on the back end. If you're not going to have the analytics, you don't have insight to pass to your sales teams. So you see how everything is linked. And most companies, in my viewpoint, not most companies actually, some companies aren't able to elevate themselves away from the day-to-day, which is, I need to generate leads within these accounts. And that's obviously not the goal of ABM. Or that's not the primary goal of ABM.
Yep, understood. So I suspect over those 5 years, you've seen some interesting examples. Do you have any examples offhand that you can think of, or case studies where they did it right and they saw some nice results?
Yeah, so I've got a few examples of companies that we've worked with over the years, HP being one, Couchbase being another, One Identity being another company that we work with or worked with. There's a number of companies, and all of them work with slightly different types. Some of these companies have done what I would call full end-to-end ABM, and that's one-to-many or one-to-one. Some of these companies have done tactical ABM, and what I mean by that is sometimes if you pick a really good tactic, let's say direct mail, and you have a lot of thought into the proposition and the message you're going to deliver, and you've got a really good orchestration plan, that can resonate just as well as having a full end-to-end omni-channel program. Often what we find is companies try to bite off more they can chew. They try to do the whole thing, and they don't have the budgets or the resources or even the time to do it. And so they take 3 or 4 months to get an ABM program off the ground. By that point, they got sales excited at the start. Sales are then uninspired 4 months later because they think that they should have had something in market. You then tell them, we spent the last 4 months getting it ready. Now we're going to go to market, and sales are already on your back. That's not a good place to be in. So in terms of results, we've seen some really amazing results. We've seen some clients, we've got for every dollar we've spent, we've got $157 in return. We've seen some accounts even higher than that. So we've seen one account in particular, which I think was something around $1,400 and something dollars for every dollar spent. So we see massive uplift when we engage with an ABM program. It's just making sure A, the organization's ready, and B, they understand what they're getting themselves in for.
Right. And I guess one of the key things seems to be coordination between sales and marketing, or at least the respect of each other's roles.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with sales and marketing. So actually, as a transition of what we've seen, when we first started doing ABM programs, we were working a lot with the marketing teams building what I would call marketing programs, and then we were handing it over to them to then talk to the sales team. Over the 5 years that I've been doing this, and 5 years doesn't probably sound like a long time, but actually, in the world that we're now living in, I think 5 years is probably a fairly long period of time. But what we have seen is that we've moved further and further downstream. What I mean by that is not moved, but we spend more of our time. What I mean by that is we still do the messaging, we still do the content, creative activation, etc., but we're spending way more time on the sales enablement piece than we ever have before. And when I say spending time, I don't just mean, handing off an account insight report. I mean granularly helping the sales team. Okay, salesperson, do you understand the report that we've created? What don't you understand? How can we help you leverage this? Do you want us to help you build copy? Just going into that type of detail, and that's been a huge success area for us because it shows we basically can see a high conversion rate when we do that kind of work.
Okay, so it's not just dealing with the marketing team, but working with the sales team too to make sure that they're following the process.
Yeah, and sometimes that's a political no-no, but I would argue that if you don't do both, you're doomed to fail. Well, you're not doomed to fail, but you're not realizing as strong results as you could.
Taken. So one of the things that I've struggled with in my own marketing is, I get the idea of you have your very, very important prospects, and you want to give them one-to-one if you can, and you have some further down where you want to be efficient and you want to give a message that will still sort of resonate, but it doesn't take nearly as much time and research to build very specific, customized one-to-one messaging. So knowing how to do the messaging is kind of a hard thing, and there's no system that will give you that.
No, I think it actually leverages off the segmentation. we have a very linear way of working in marketing where sometimes we focus on personas, or we focus on audience types, or we focus on verticals. Actually, that's not the segment. There are lots and lots of other segments. Could it be complementary? Could it be partners? Could it be competitors? There are lots of ways to slice and dice those segments. If you start to slice and dice your segments into different methodologies that aren't the norm in the market. So, for example, if you do a persona-based ABM program, you can do one and at a one-to-many level, and you will generate some cut through. But unfortunately, at the moment, so many people are doing those type of programs that actually getting that cut through is quite difficult. If you took a different type of approach, a different type of segmentation, that would lead you down a different type of messaging route, which would probably create better cut through because there's less companies doing that. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So, I mean, one thing I'm thinking of is perhaps getting some intelligence and figuring out maybe what prospects are using different competitors' products, and maybe hitting them with that at that angle.
Exactly. Those are the kinds of things you might want to think about. But again, it's all the problem we face in this market is that when people start thinking segmentation, they automatically go, okay, I'm going to use intent, or I'm going to use predictive, or whatever it might be. And all of those tools are amazing, but you need to use them in the right way. And you can use them in lots of different ways to build out your to build out your segmentation, which then informs your messaging.
That makes sense. Beautiful. So where do you things have changed over the last 5 years on ABM, and it still seems to be a hot topic. What do you think the landscape or the thought process will be in a year from now, or in 5 years from now? How are things going to be progressing?
So I think when we first started doing it, we were quite odd. When we first started doing ABM, we actually focused on one-to-many ABM. We did it really, really well, and then we worked up to one-to-one. And actually, that's the way I think most organizations should take a stance. Not most some organizations. Some organizations are always going to be focused on the one-to-one area. Where I think ABM is going in the marketplace is, in a couple of years, it's just going to be the way we do marketing. It's not going to be called ABM because the tools and technologies will allow us to be hyper-personalized at any given time. The nuances are going to be in how much research and insight you can do into to the audience you're going after to differentiate your message. Where I do think ABM is going is in building an infrastructure that allows you to be able to personalize down to accounts, down to personas, down to owners, and then bring that messaging in to create really unique customer experiences. There are lots of tools and technologies out there at the moment that do some of this, but they don't work together you know what I'm trying to say. You know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, in harmony.
Harmonious, yeah.
Harmoniously together. There's lots of tools and technologies out there, but they don't all work harmoniously together. And that, I think, is a massive battleground for us. I think the other interesting thing with ABM is that what we're seeing is ABM isn't being called ABM anymore. It's being called digital transformation or customer advocacy programs. But the approach you take in a B2B world is still an account-based marketing methodology. It's just you label it something slightly different. And for me, I think ABM programs today are still focused on what companies want to say to their audience. We position ourselves as a customer-obsessed unified agency. And the reason why we do that is because what we're trying to do is to help our clients to become more customer obsessed. And what I mean by that is always thinking about the audience and their needs first. Most companies still think they do this, but they honestly do not. We see it all the time. They say, here's our messaging framework. And we look at it and it's always what they want to tell the customer is inside out rather than outside in.
Makes sense. And you brought up a good point. So when you're talking about customers, so I guess ABM could be for growing existing customers or bringing in new prospects and new customers.
Absolutely. ABM is across the whole spectrum. It should be everything from brand all the way through to upsell, cross-sell to customer advocacy programs.
Mm-hmm. And then when you were saying the more you learn about the companies, the better. So you can basically triangulate on various slices of your market and not just go for certain personas, but certain overlap the personas and the intent and predictive and to be able to get, you'll get more groups that way, but each one will be more closer to one-to-one marketing.
Correct.
As opposed to just
correct
a general slice.
Don't just do a general slice. I think everyone's doing general slices at the moment. We see it all the time. Even the big companies are just doing general slices. Start to really hone down what it is that you think separates you from the audience, and make sure that the audience actually care about that.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And then the messaging you kind of brushed on again. I think that's the hardest part. I'm a numbers guy and a data guy, and I that part is fairly easy to me. But getting the messaging down and making sure it resonates with the person as much as possible is an art.
Absolutely. And the art is in matching the two things together. Again, in the ABM world, what I think is happening at the moment is everyone's focusing on ones and zeros on data. And I'll be frank with you, I'm one of those people. I'm very much a data guy. People are totally forgetting about the message. And that's why certainly here I surround myself with people that are really good at building messaging, but understanding messaging from a data analysis point of view, so that we can build really focused ABM programs.
Beautiful. I love it. Any other, what am I missing? Let's see. So I guess, it doesn't really matter what the size of the company is, what the industry is, even like you said, the geography. That's a good point. What about Europe? What about GDPR? How does that factor in all of this?
So GDPR hasn't necessarily affected the ability to run ABM programs. What it's just affected is the how much more stringent you have to be in how you gather data, in how you pass data across, whether you're a processor or an operator or a controller. So GDPR hasn't massively affected us in terms of running ABM programs. If anything, I actually say it's improved it, because it now means that the data you get through is clean, it's been opted in. You have a greater chance of success with those audiences. The problem with GDPR is that most companies do not understand it whatsoever. Sorry, when I say companies, I don't mean the big vendors, the IBMs, HPs, VMwares, those kind of guys. What I mean is most companies that are running ABM on these big companies' behalf, they don't understand the GDPR correctly, and because they don't understand GDPR correctly, I suspect there's going to be a big court case fairly soon, and when there is, everyone will fall in line.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. The $10,000.
It's too nebulous. I think it's way too nebulous at this moment in time for it to affect the wider market.
And then I hear California is heading that similar direction.
Is it really? I genuinely did not know that.
So that would be, that'll be a problem, because the companies here, Europe is maybe 10 or 20% of their business, and it's a big chunk, but then you start to get into individual states, and it's like, oh boy, because people move so fast, it's hard to, at some point, I guess everybody's going to have to, and it's probably a good habit to adopt the controls related to GDPR for everything, for all marketing, because it's going to head that way anyway.
Yeah, I can only comment on my experience of living in England versus living here. Living in the UK, as an example, I would get the occasional spam phone call, but not so much. What I've experienced since living here, and I've only been here a few months, I get spam calls all the time, because obviously my data privacy is a lot lower than it potentially is in the UK, or especially around GDPR. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Good. Well, I appreciate it. This is it's wonderful discussing this with you. It's a fun topic, and I like it because it gets sales and marketing on the same page. They get to work together on the high value accounts and the high value strategy, and so that's a wonderful thing. And then having data, to me, data is king. Some people say content is king. It's probably both. If you have really good content that speaks to people and resonates with them, and you're hitting them at the right time and everything, it's a beautiful thing. So.
Yeah, I think it's look, it's been a really interesting area. I just think there's so much you can do to make it better, and it probably most companies aren't. But quite a few companies have some experience of doing it well, and there I think there's a longer runway to make it better than it ever has been before.
That makes sense. Well, I love your strategy first, planning first, ABM's approach. Thank you for your time, Ricky. And I look forward to visiting you in your new San Francisco office soon. Cheers.